Ferrari resurgence back on track? This was an interesting race because it was the first race that was kind of different in terms of climate and in terms of layout and stuff of a racetrack this season, which gave us our first look as to whether people would just dominant on one kind of track layout and circuit or whatever, or whether it was more of an all-round package. Now, Ferrari sure are seeming to look like they have a very strong all-round package, able to take on and be strong at most circuits. So they're definitely going to be favourites moving forwards into the season, and it's more going to be a case of how many points do they go ahead, I think, rather than anything else. Red Bull are struggling a lot with reliability, and that is definitely putting them on the back foot. I think the most surprising thing coming out of this weekend with 3 races in, and the most surprising thing is the fact that Max Verstappen, second favourite in the championship, is 6th in the driver's title, and Red Bull is 3rd, behind Mercedes, who have easily had a very difficult start to the year in terms of year gone past, and certainly are not the ones to watch this season. A very surprising turn of events indeed, and just really showing kind of the extent of Red Bull's issue. If they can't get on top of these reliability problems, they're not going to be contenders for the championship, because consistency over everything is key. Another very strong performance by Charles Leclerc, really rubber stamping his name as favourite to win the 2022 championship. It's the 2nd win for him of the year, 3rd podium, and the lowest he's finished is 2nd. I said, and I don't know if I ever said it on video, but I definitely said off camera, Sainz has got 3 races. If he's too far behind in 3 races, Ferrari will definitely shift focus. They will definitely turn their eye to focusing on Leclerc and playing Sainz as second fiddle. Now, the one saving grace Sainz has is that Red Bull are snookering themselves with poor performance via reliability. In this instance, it basically means Leclerc, 3 races in, has like a 70-point lead or something ridiculous in the driver's standing, which means right now, Ferrari don't necessarily have to make a decision on who they're going to back or what horse they're going to put all their chips on, if you will. So it does give Sainz a little bit more time. However, saying that, Sainz really needs to start getting his act together if he really wants a chance to be in for a shout of getting the driver's title this year. It wasn't a good weekend for the Spaniard at all. He had some issues with the car, yes, notably not his fault, but the race start and the impatience to gain positions, I think, showed he needs to take these few weeks to just recalibrate. See, Leclerc is winning. Use that to fuel him to keep a level head. He's been known for the last few years as the smooth operator, and trust me, at the Australian Grand Prix, that is not a performance we saw. We saw a desperate man trying to make up positions. The point of the thing is that the car had the pace to win, clearly, and take pole, double clearly, because the other version of the car did. So I don't think he needed to rush through making those overtakes. He could have taken a few laps. I don't think he thought starting from the bottom of the top 10 he was really going to challenge for the win, but he could have been in a position a little bit like in Bahrain where he was 3rd, maybe 4th with a little bit to do, and then inherited that 2nd when Verstappen fell out. Perez did a great job of taking advantage and getting the maximum points he could this weekend, albeit with his teammate falling out of the race and DNFing. It certainly wasn't the weekend that Red Bull was after, and I'm sure if they could have chosen a driver to fall out of the race, it would have been Perez, not Verstappen. But alas, Perez did a great job in basically reassuring that Red Bull is the 2nd best car, so long as it can stay on the track reliability-wise. The Mercedes once again picked up points on a case of other drivers not finishing the race. Now, I'm not going to take too much away from Mercedes here because they did position themselves in a good place to pick up on points had drivers not finished, i.e. Sainz and Verstappen. Russell drove an extremely clean race to keep himself ahead of Hamilton to pick up his first podium with Mercedes, finishing 3rd behind Perez and Leclerc. Hamilton was 4th. It was questionable at one point whether they were going to use team orders to swap the cars, but I'm quite glad they didn't. We're very early in the season, and to be honest, neither Hamilton nor Russell really look like they're in a position to challenge for either championship, so I don't think team orders is necessarily a necessity for that team this year in terms of trying to pick up points. Both drivers are basically driving for the constructors. It was a great weekend for McLaren, not only qualifying both cars in the top 10, but also finishing both cars in the top 10 as well. Norris and Ricciardo basically followed each other around for most of the race, but it was a good performance from them. Now the team and the drivers themselves have said they believe it's track-specific performance, not that they've solved their issues. But I think it goes to show that if they can solve those overheating issues they've been struggling with in places like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, where I think the climate is hotter. Well, I know the climate is hotter, but basically where the climate is hotter, so the heat in the cars and everything is performing at a higher level than maybe somewhere like Melbourne. If they can overcome those issues, I think they are definitely within a shout for fighting Mercedes for P3. Maybe not if it takes too many races, because they'll just lose too many points. But this is a good step in the right direction, and I think it's a good indicator of their potential pace as well. Again, they're not looking like they're going to be in the top 3. And they're not looking like they're going to be able to challenge for the championship. That does really seem like a Red Bull Ferrari fight, like we had a Red Bull Mercedes fight last year. Rounding off the top 10, we had Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, showing again that's a strong midfield car. It's not quite up there with the front runners, but it is seeming to be performing as best of the rest in comparison with the cars around it. Excitingly, we had 4 different midfield cars in the bottom of the top 10. So Ocon led across the line Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, Gasly in the Alfa Tauri, and Alex Albon picking up Williams' first points of the season, taking home 10th in the Williams. Albon did a phenomenal job of making one set of tyres basically run the whole race. They took a pit stop at the very, literally in the final lap to change onto another compound to avoid the penalty or the fine or whatever they would have got. Quite honestly, in my opinion, I don't know what the rules are, because I don't think we've had that happen for quite some time. A driver managed to get to the end of the race without changing tyres at all. But in my opinion, if they get to the end of the race on one set of tyres, that's instant disqualification, because it's a breach of a very fundamental rule, which is you have to run 2 sets of tyres, 2 different compounds. Obviously, otherwise everyone would just do it without taking a pit stop if they could. It's interesting to see Albon manage to make it to the end without needing that pit stop though, when a lot of the other drivers were complaining specifically about the hard tyres quite early on in the race as well. And the performance of the hard tyres seemed to be quite bad, then get better, then really drop off the cliff as well. So it's very interesting to see him manage to do that. We now get into the really weird part of the season, which would normally be the start of our European leg, but after Imola, we're going to jump across the pond to Miami for a random American race, which, for reasons unbeknown to anyone, can't happen close to the other American rounds or even near the Canadian round in the middle of the European leg, when we normally do that weird jump across the pond in the summer. But we have Imola up next. Imola that has signed for a multi-year contract as well, so will be staying on the calendar for quite a while into the future. I think 25 it's signed till. That's a couple of years, but it's still a couple of years that it's confirmed on the calendar. There's also talk of a potential second race in Singapore this year to cover the loss of the Russian Grand Prix later on in the season, but that is still to be confirmed. I feel like the Australian Grand Prix was an exciting race. There was a lot going on. I think what's moving forwards, the things to kind of keep an eye on is when Ferrari make that switch. Sainz has really got to pull it out if he doesn't want to be branded second driver this early in the season. And to be fair, if Red Bull can get on top of their reliability issues, Ferrari will be forced to make that choice sooner rather than later. And there'll come a point where there's just no point. I mean, Sainz is 3rd in the championship behind Russell, which that is no blight on Russell. That's a blight on Sainz in the fastest car on the grid, the most all-round car on the grid, capable of being quick at multiple different circuit types. And he is behind a car that is notably much worse than it has been in the past 8 years. I don't want to be too picky here, but I think Sainz's races are numbered. There's talk of a potential multi or an extension to his contract as well with Ferrari. Apparently, according to headlines, according to Ferrari, from what I've heard, the contract is pulled together and ready to be signed, but he hasn't signed it. The only other thing I will say, the performance of the Haas was very surprising this weekend. They've been a clear top 10 runner for the first 2 races of the season, running that supremely powered, apparently, Ferrari engine. But now we come to Australia and they seem to have lost a lot of form. Good job from Mick Schumacher outperforming his teammate this weekend. I think it's a case for Schumacher this year that he's just got to be performing on par, if not a bit better than Magnussen. He'll have a bit of leeway on the fact that Magnussen is a much more experienced driver than him. But now he doesn't have the car to lean back on to be an excuse as to why he's not performing up in the top of the midfield and in the low top 10 as well. So he'll really need to put some performance in to start getting some attention from some other teams. Maybe looking at a move for next season, but we will find out in due course. That's all I have to talk to you about today in this track talk. Do let me know your thoughts, feelings about Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, all of the above from the Australian Grand Prix and moving on to Imola down in the comment box below, and I will carry on the conversation with you there. But for now, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's been an absolute blast as always. If you enjoyed this video, go show that like button, some good old-fashioned love. And if you want to support the channel, go hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss next time I upload a video. Stay awesome, and I will see you all in the next video! Feels like a lot happened that race, but maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just quite run of the mill.